what that means as far as political representation for us. There are some who argue that perhaps to simply concentrate on electoral politics is not the as exclusive means to advance perhaps may not be prudent. We probably at this point ought to start looking at economic development. And I think there's been a big deal of that conversation in lieu of the November 8th elections when we have this conservative landslide across the country. What do you think about that?
No, I think everything that Mr. Dawson said is true, particularly as relates to what effect the struggles that black people have made in the past is now presently having on the younger black generation. I have an opportunity to talk to young black college students on a daily basis, and it seems to be the common denominator that the civil rights struggle is over with. That's so much a part of the pages of history, and perhaps ought to be buried in the pages of history and learned only from an academic point of view in school or something. And I see, to my dismay and sadness to some large degree, how they are shucking and jiving, even to such a degree where it embarrasses Step and Fetch It. And they don't even realize that they're making clowns of themselves. And at the same time, not understanding what the true definition of freedom is. They'll rationalize and find reasons not to exercise good citizenship and go and engage in the simple act of freedom of voting for an elected representative. And by not doing so, they still will claim and cry and whine because the quality of their lives has not been improved. And the only way that they can have some impact upon the improvement of the quality of their lives is, again, to go out there and vote. And so you got this vicious cycle of not voting, nobody respecting us because we're not voting, and we're complaining because we're not being respected, but then we still don't vote again. And I think to some degree, Mr. Dawson alluded to that, and I just want to expand that a little more, that you can have laws on the books, and you can have Supreme Court of the United States interpreting the Constitution of saying what the rights of black people are. But if we are not going to take advantage of the rights that have been established for all of us by law of Congress and by the interpretation of the Constitution of the United States, that is ipso facto the same as if we don't have any rights at all. And that's the challenge that I like to make, for people to realize the rights are given, but there are also rights to be forsaken if they're not rights to be exercised.
Very good. And I think, Mr. Dawson, when we talk about the disfranchisement movement in the 1890s, I think that at an opportunity when blacks had an opportunity after the Civil War to become involved in politics, but after 1890 they were simply cut out, and between 1890 and 1960 we really did not participate in the South. Let's look at it let's talk about that and the impact that you think that by looking at history from that perspective might be able to tell us something about what we ought to do today.
Oh gosh, you're asking from a historical perspective, and as the younger of the three of us, I like to kind of defer to both your seniority. From my understanding,
because I thought he was older than I.
Yeah. You've been practicing law for as long as I've been on this earth. Okay. Now, from what I understand, and I'm going to really ask my friend JBlackshear to help me out here. From what I can understand, that period beginning about the late 1880s up until, gosh, at least a period from 1880s to 1930s is generally regarded as the nadir, which was the deepest, darkest period as far as our existence here post-Civil War. I mean, that was a period of time when we had absolutely no rights that anyone had to respect. And I think people, as I understand it, JBlackshear, black folks persevered, they struggled, they hung together, and they survived. People like my grandmother in rural Georgia, and I've read a lot about rural Georgia in that time period. It was not a very pleasant place for a black person to be. So I think what needs to happen now is that we're going to have to really understand how we were able to persevere and to survive and to sustain during that time period. And it's interesting you asked that, because you mentioned something, Attorney Blackshear, that you perceived as a lack of responsibleness on the part of young black folks, and I wonder if that perception is out there, and I share that perception. I wonder if that's their fault alone. I wonder if we of an older generation perhaps ought to share some of the blame for not really teaching the history and passing down the legacy and telling our young people that don't be misled about what you think is, you know, is a gravy train and things are okay and they're fine, that we could still, I mean, history repeats itself and we could find ourselves back where we were some time ago.
Well, it's unquestionably